What up, baby? How y'all doing? What's up? What's up? Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, I'm out here, man. Hey, what's up, man? It's SHILO. And we are back, man. It's been a while. What up, everybody? I've been reading good, at least rising scripts. I did the Sabbath reading earlier. Take my beard down. I cut my beard. Don't worry, I'm gonna let it grow back. Well, it's been a while, man. It's been a while. I've been having all kind of humbug going on. It's been a while, so I've been procrastinating on this reading with Shallow shit, man. But I've been getting back into the reading, trying to build it back up again, I really been procrastinating, saying that I was gonna start this back up and try to jump back into it, but I've been putting off. And since I was just sitting in the bed looking at the ceiling and shit, I was like, man, I could read. I could be reading right now. And instead of waiting until tomorrow, let me get my butt up and read. So we are more than halfway done with this book. The book is called Africans in Colonial Louisiana by Ms. Gwendolyn Midlo Hall. We are almost to chapter 9. We have a couple of pages. Man, we got about 5 pages before we get to chapter 9, and I want to try to get to chapter 9. At least that's the objective right now. Get to chapter 9. Chapter 9 is the re-Africanization under Spanish rule. Man, I haven't done this in a minute. It feels strange. But I got pens, highlighters, maybe a pencil or two, whatever. Get your stuff together, and we're going to seek and find what lies between the pages, man. The sea of pages that Miss Gwendolyn Midlo Hall has left behind for us, and, see what treasures await us, man. What treasures await us? What can we learn and grow from within the pages that Miss Gwendolyn has said before us, man? Man, I'm telling you, man, there's all kind of shit been going. I hurt my shoulder. Oh man, I've been out of there. Oh, I've been fighting for my children. Oh man, I'm still doing that, man. Back and forth, man, on the road, man. It's been all type of shit. But we are in chapter 8 right now, called the Point Capee Post. The Point Capee Post. Shit, I don't even remember, honestly, tell you the truth. I don't remember what was the last thing we read about. It was a lot going on. I know it was a lot going on, and I hate that I left y'all without something to listen to. But hey, we back. Let's try it. Let's get it in, man. Let's get it in. We only got a couple of chapters left. The book has 11 chapters in it, and we're working on getting to chapter 9. So we have 9, 10, and 11. And once we get to 11, that's going to be it for the book. At least that's all I'm reading. I'm not going to go into any of the appendixes or Appendix A, and which has a lot of good information, but the information that is within the appendix is something that you need to sit down and study. It's something you need to take notes on. It gives a bunch of numbers and dates on how many slaves came from this area or that area, and to where they went, to what they had, were they men, women, children, all the above. And I don't want to go through the appendix for it. At least not for me, I don't. But and it's quite a few. It's an appendix A, B, C, D, and then it has the notes for the sources, notes on the sources in it, and the index. We won't read that. We will not read that, but we will keep on pushing through chapters 9, 10, and 11, which are the last chapters that we have left to read. So let's pick back up. We're on page 263, and we have to make it to 380. That's where we're going, the destination. And I wonder if I don't remember if I marked the book of Enoch on here. I have been trying to keep track of all the books that I've read not since I started, but since I started keeping track of them. And I'm at 29. I'm at 29 books, and this will put me at book 30 once I'm done reading it, if I haven't finished reading. I'll probably finish reading this one before I finish reading the book of Jasher. But either way, let's go ahead. We're gonna jump off where we left off. It don't really have a designation for where we leave it, where we left off at. So let's try to pick it up and see what we can gather from it. Now, while the designation of quaterun has fairly clear meaning in the emancipation documents, there are only 4 quateruns among the 2,680 slaves in inventoried at Point Capee between 1771 and 1802. Now, all of them involve Nanette and her 3 children. And when Nanette appeared in the inventory of the estate of Jean de Cure in 1771, she was listed as one of 3 mulatto children of the Griff mother. Now, when she was inventoried again upon the death of the widow de Cure in 1779, she was a quadroon, or quaterun, mother of Antoine and Lazare. Now, 2 young mulatto boys. Now, when she and her children were inventoried again in 1798, her race was unidentified, and her children had become red quadroons, or quaterun rouge. Now, after her aunt purchased her in order to free her after years of litigation, she became a mulatto. And there was one clear-cut case of socio-racial promotion upon emancipation. And we have seen that Jean was listed as Black and her son's race unidentified. And when they were inventoried her for sale after the death of her master, Claude Chenille. Now, when they were both freed after she established with little doubt that Henri was fathered by Trinone, she became a mulatto and her son became a quadroon. Now, there is evidence of fairly widespread socio-racial promotion of Black to mulatto among concubines of white men, and the total census from Louisiana in 1777 counts 166 free and 286 mixed blood slaves, females, but only 107 free and 259 mixed blood slave males. Now, or a total of 452 mixed blood slave females and 366 mixed blood males, giving a male-female ratio of 0.81, that is 81 males to each 100 females. Now, I'm glad they said that so I can understand the ratio better. Which is not convincing for a locally born population. And since these figures include all of Louisiana, migration among districts is not a factor. It is difficult to compare the extent of race mixture in Louisiana with that in other colonies, and among the slaves inventoried at Point Capee between 1771 and 1802, approximately 6% were listed as mixed bloods. The absolute numbers of 157, 85 males, 70 females, and 2 whose sex was not identified. There were 2,396 Blacks, 91% of the sample, and the race of 126 slaves, or 4.8%, was not identified. In Guadalupe, between 1770 and 1789, 14.3% of the slave population was racially mixed. And these crude percentages do not help us compare the extent of race mixture with other regions, if all the slaves are lumped together, including Africans and other imported slaves. Furthermore, the length of time that slaves of African descent had been in the region is an important factor, since the descendants of any racially mixed slaves are necessarily racially mixed. And by 1664, slaves began to be brought to Guadalupe in large numbers, whereas slaves first appeared in the census at Point Capee in 1731. The Point Capee Post had a much higher percentage of adult Africans than the South Carolina and Georgia Low Country and Martinique, or Guadalupe. And while the problem of lumping together locally born and imported slaves can be solved by making calculations based upon local Creoles only, the impact of the length of time slaves had been in the region is difficult to quantify. Now, furthermore, we have established that in Louisiana, significant numbers of racially mixed slaves were freed and passed into the white population. And the earliest lists of slaves in Point Capee date from 1771, when 20% of the Creole slaves were racially mixed. There was a fairly steady proportion of racially mixed slaves among the Creoles, with the slight decrease from after the 1795 conspiracy, and when 9 male mulatto slaves were executed or exiled. And after 1800, the numbers of mulatto slaves increased, equaling the proportions found in the earliest list of slaves. And though the increase must be partially explained by a redefinition of some of the grifts as mulattoes. Although the racial definition of these documents are at times imprecise, the evidence points overwhelmingly towards mating between white men and black women as the main source of mulatto children. It is, let me mark that. I think that's a key point. How did the mulatto children come? White men, pink people, and copper women. Although the racial points overwhelmingly toward matings between white men and black women as the main source of mulatto children. Man, ain't that something? It is less likely that the mulatto slaves were born of 2 mulatto parents, and relatively few mulatto women remained enslaved for long. And those defined as such were often black Indian women who were particularly defiant and rarely mated with white men. And I can't wait. That's what we're going to read next, the Black Indians, once I finish this one. There were a few quadroon slaves on the list, and out of the 68 racially mixed children whose race and the race of whose mother can be reasonably determined, black Creole women gave birth to 41 mulatto children and 4 grift children. Mulatto women gave birth to 2 mulatto children and 8 grift children. Grift women gave birth to 3 mulatto children and 1 grift child, and African women gave birth to 5 mulatto and 2 grift children. It seems clear that the mulatto children were overwhelmingly first-generation racial mixtures whose mothers were black and whose fathers were white, and slave women designated as mulattoes rarely mated with white men. An African woman whose children were racially mixed mated more often with white than with mulatto men. And these partners contrast sharply with those of Guadalupe, where there was a steady drop of mixed blood slaves, especially mulattoes, between 1778 and 1786. And a rise in the proportion of second-generation racially mixed slaves, quadroons, the métis, and slaves who were 3/4 black, deriving from matings between mulatto and black slaves, the capris. And in Louisiana, matings between white men and black slave women continued apace. Now, Point Capee slave inventories from 1771 to 1802 showed that the percentage of the mixed bloods in the Creole slave population diminished sharply with age. And while 17.7% of the Creole slaves under age 15 were mixed bloods, only 10.8% aged 15 and older were racially mixed. It is unlikely that mixed blood slaves had a higher mortality rate than black slaves, or that significant numbers of them were sold out of the district, and sales and estate sales documents from Point Capee reveal that no mixed blood slaves were sold out of the district, and that 7 were sold into the district. While some could have been removed from the district and sold elsewhere, mulatto slaves, especially men, were highly valued and trained to play police and management role on the estates. Their, re, their reduced numbers in higher age groups were due almost entirely to emancipation. The Poincaré Post documents dating between 1771 and 1802 contain 61 examples of emancipation of slaves. And even though documents from the years 1772, 1773, 1774, 1775, 1776, 1777, 1780, and 1781 are entirely missing, and there are large gaps in later years. In Spain, there is a list of emancipation documents of 17 other slaves from Pointe-Coupee. These numbers are probably only a fraction of the emancipations that actually took place. And since there has been a systematic destruction of emancipation records in Louisiana, the price of having an African ancestor has been extremely high. Now, emancipation doctrines, lettres de liberté, have been largely neglected in parish courthouses, and access to those records has gone unsupervised. But even these minimal figures indicate a comparatively high emancipation rate. Now, these 78 emancipations are the minimum that actually took place, and this writer is inclined to consider those records for 1780 found in Spain, and that is 8 per 1,000, as probably the most reliable. Now, only one of these 8 could considerably have been freed for military service during the war against the British, and this emancipation rate is much higher than that in the West Indies, during the early 19th century, exceeded only by St. Vincent and the Bahamas in 1834. Now, after general emancipation had already become law, and substantially higher than the emancipation rate in the 19th century Cuba. In a district where the slaves whose race and sex were identified were 91% Black and 58.4% male. It is striking that those 78 emancipated slaves were, in contrast, 38.5% Black and 38.5% male. The other emancipated slaves were 48.7% mulatto, 1.3% Griff, and 5.1% quadroon, and the race of 6.4% was not indicated. And clearly, then Black male slaves were least likely to be freed, and following by Black females, mixed blood males, and mixed blood females. The Black men, about whom we know the circumstances of emancipation, brought themselves to after litigation, and they were 2 elderly African men, one Bambara and one Congo, freed through self-purchase. One Black adult male slave was freed conditionally as a reward for his services. In 1784, Arnaud Dubertrand, master surgeon of the post, returned to France. He sold his entire estate, including 58 slaves, and to Julien Poydras. Included in the sales were the service of Pierre Nigre Creole, Commodore, for a period of 5 years, and after which the said senior Dubertrand seller wishes to and understands that his freedom will be given to him and the buyer. Now, Poydras obligates himself to free him in the proper form, and Pierre seemed to fit the category of management level slaves on the estate whose loyalty was sought by the promise of eventual freedom. Now, although Pierre was Black, many of them were mixed blood men. Now, among the 17 mixed blood males found in the emancipation records, 13 were between 1 month and 15 years of age. Now, 3 of these children were brought by white men for the purpose of freeing them, and 4 were freed gratuitously by their owner during his lifetime, and 1 was recognized as a natural child of the owner and freed under his will. 1 was the 8-year-old mulatto son of Congo woman, and both mother and son were freed under their owner's will. Another child and his mother were freed under their owner's will, and a mulatto of undetermined age was freed gratuitously. I know I pronounced that shit wrong. Gratitude, gratuitously by the heirs in the absence of a will, because his deceased master had promised to free him. Now 3 adult mulatto men aged 28 to 34 brought themselves, and they paid dearly. Now Isidore Malatri, age 34, paid 870 pastres, a good price, but in addition, he obliged himself to give 5 more years of free service, working as before, but not cultivating the land. And Henri Malatri paid his master 753 pastres and agreed to provide him with 6 years of free service. A 28-year-old mulatto brought his freedom unconditionally, but paid 1,000 pastres, a high price. And many male mulatto slaves were highly valued. They played a role of armed guards on the estate. And in a case involving the shooting of a slave who was found stealing from his neighbor's cornfield, M. Bourguit explained that his black Creole slave was given a gun with which to guard the cornfield because his mulatto was not home. Now, although the relatively large numbers of the mixed blood females who were freed appears, at first glance, to involve freedom for concubines of white men, a closer look at the data does not bear this out, and emancipation did not come easily for any adult woman. And among the 24 mixed blood females freed, 10 children and only 5 adults were freed gratuitously by whites. Now, 3 mixed blood females were purchased by non-white female relatives, including a quadroon child freed by her slave mother. 5 mixed blood women bought themselves, and 3 of them after initiating litigations to force their masters to sell them. 11 black women bought themselves, and 4 after litigation. And Augustine Negrice petitioned to be estimated and sold by her master. But 3 years after the decree of the court, she and her master, Joseph Auguer, arrived at a compromise. He promised not to mistreat her and to treat her like a good domestic servant, and she promised to serve him faithfully and well for 9 years, after which he would free her. Now Marie de Maquin successfully sued Pierre Mathide to confirm the freedom he had already granted to her and to her mixed blood son. When he denied he had freed them and tried to sell them, most black women, when he agreed to free them, when he had freed them and tried to sell them. Now, most of the black women who bought themselves were elderly. And among the 20 black women freed, 10 were aged 50 and over. And even at this advanced age, the women paid handsomely for their freedom, which was, besides, sometimes conditional. And some of these remained obligated to perform services for the masters for various time periods. Now, Augustine, age 50, paid 360 pastres for herself, but she did not have the right to enjoy her freedom until after the death of her master, who explained that he was happy with her faithfulness and her service. I bet you was. I bet you fucking was. Who wouldn't be happy with somebody working for free? Marie Naglise, age 60, was freed by the widow Lejeune, provided she continued to faithfully serve the 2 demoiselles, Brigitte and Pelagie. And Augustine, age 60, was freed by her daughter, who paid 438 pastres, a very high price for a slave her age. And Genevieve, age 54, paid 240 pasties for her freedom. And Manan, age 70, paid 100 pasties for herself and was mortgaged to Dame Elaine. And Frise, age 65, paid 120 pasties, and Francois, age 50, paid 230 pasties respectfully for their freedom. Now, Catherine, age 65, paid 64 pasties in the form of 8 oxen and cows. And only 2 of these elderly black women, probably mammies or white children, were freed unconditionally. Now, Francois, the Grease Creole, age 50, was freed by Francois Alain and Marie Ricard, his wife, graciously and unconditionally. And Euphrasie, a black woman aged 60, was freed in 1799 unconditionally by her living master. And it is questionable whether freedom granted to all old slaves was a favor, and it could have been a means of abandoning responsibility for an elderly and no longer useful slave. Now, prices paid for freedom for young slaves and for or by elderly slaves were quite high. And in 1785, Therese Negrisi Libri paid 300 pasties for her 2-year-old grandson after forcing his master to allow her to purchase him through litigations. And in 1793, a 40-year-old mulatto woman was freed for 1,050 pasties in 1796. A 2-year-old mulatto male for 280 pasties and a 6-year-old quadroon female for 350 pasties. And in 1800, the 8-year-old quadroon male was freed for 700 pasties, and in 1802, a 10-year-old griff female for 1,050 pasties. A 36-year-old black male was freed for 1,225 pasties in 1801. And in 1794, according to the governor, Carondelet, a black man recently arrived from Africa was worth about 250 pasties. Man, I forget how much the pasties are. We almost there. I forget how much them pasties compared to the dollar. Now, there were a few cases of slaves freed graciously by whites who were not their lovers or their fathers. Excuse me. And among the 8 black women freed graciously by whites, 4 were clearly concubines, and some of their mothers were mulatto children. And on them, one of them was identified as African Louise Congo, mother Louise, it's not Louise. I wonder how you pronounce it. Louise Congo, mother of a mulatto child, both of whom were freed under the will of their master. Some white men were reluctant to totally abandon their property rights in their concubines. And this pattern is documented as early as 1746, when Antoine Moulin, surgeon of Point Capee Post, granted freedom to his female slave Charlotte of the Senegal Wolof Nation, and to her 2-year-old child, Louis. She was to serve him as a slave as long as he remained in the colony, and was to enjoy her liberty only if he returned to France or died. And George Olivio Fields freed the 5 mulatto children born to his negress, Magdalene. Where have I heard that name before? Magdalene. Now their ages were 8, 7, 6, 3, and 10 months. 2 days later, he freed their mother, provided she continues to serve me until the day of my death. and as she has until now, as she has until now. Now, Cecil's white lover purchased her freedom, but he tried to have her re-enslaved after she left him, and so that she could become his love slave in law as well as in effect. And Simon Creoset freed a black woman and her two mulatto children from the estate of Louis Renard Duval, but the woman was obligated to serve him for a year after Duval's death. And Creoset compensated the estate for the price of these three slaves through though two of them had been freed under the will of the deceased, and the third was born after the will was written, and half their value was deducted from the price of Creoset paid. Now, since he was an heir entitled to half of the estate. Two more pages. 2.5. 3. 2.5. A few white men were open-handed, and Jean-Baptiste Balquet freed his negresse Genevieve for good service, fidelity, and in remuneration. So we have to look up that word. We're going to see what that remuneration is. Put a question mark by it. Remuneration. Of other services which these negresses had rendered him. Now, he also freed her two children, aged 2 and 3 years, whose race was not indicated, and for having been born in my house. Jean-Baptiste Nicolet, the merchant born in Rochefort, wrote in his will that he was a bachelor, had no children, and wanted to free his slave Rose and her son, and to protect them from his heirs residing in France. And he left 2,000 pastries, a handsome sum, to Ricard de Rotard, to take charge of all his affairs after his death. And in his will, Simon Lecoeur recognized two mulatto children as his natural children. And this was unusual because most documents hinted broadly at, but did not openly avow the relationship Lecoeur asked his brother to protect his mulatto children. Did not avow the relationship. I thought it was a comma, my bad. Now, Lecoeur asked his brother to protect his mulatto children, to make sure that their rights were defended, and to free them. And in this case, the widow opposed the emancipation of her husband's mulatto children, but without success. And this was the only instance encountered in which an heir tried to prevent the emancipation of either a concubine or a natural child of the deceased. Now, the widow and heirs of Jean de Cure freed Louis Malatri, even in the absence of a will, and because the deceased had promised him his freedom. Now, these records reveal two patterns of emancipation. Almost all the mulattoes freed graciously were children purchased by white men, or freed under the will, or by the heirs of the master. And in 11 cases, slaves were purchased by white men in order to free them, and 9 of them were mulatto children between 2 and 10 years of age. And emancipation of mulatto children were likely by their white fathers, and accounts for the high percentage of mixed bloods among the emancipated, and for half of the males freed. Now, male adults were only 19.1% of those freed whose age could be determined, and they all had to purchase themselves at a high price and or continue to provide free service. And the adult black women were most likely the concubines and were usually mothers of mulatto children. And the mixed blood women were more often redeemed by their non-white female relatives or bought themselves. Now we know that some of these women were not mulattoes, but black Indian mixtures and very defiant individuals. And a few elderly black women were freed graciously, but most of them either brought themselves or were bought by their female relatives at the high price, and even then, their freedom was sometimes conditional. The patterns that emerged from the emancipation records explain the evolution of the mixed blood slaves population over time. Now, and by advancing age groups. Now, mulatto children sired by white fathers of means tended to the freedom of it as children, tended to be freed as children, and mixed blood adults, perhaps children of white soldiers or others without the means to free them, second generation mixtures and descendants of Indians were freed more gradually, and even though self-purchased or purchased by non-white relatives, new mulattoes continued to be born at a steady pace, although mating of white men and black women, steady pace through matings of white men and black women slaves. Ooh, there's a lot going on in there. There's a lot going on. Yeah, now all that time I wasn't tired. Now I'm about to get to the end of my reading tonight. Now I'm ready to go. All right, let's finish. You got a page and a half. It is clear from the study of Poincapee's post that race mixture and the emancipation of non-white concubines and mixed blood children of white men was extensive in 18th century Louisiana, and many emancipation documents have no doubt been destroyed. And there is strong evidence that this significant number of women of African and Indian descent and their children passed informally into the white population. Now, while no systematic study of other districts has been thus far carried out, the most casual search turns up similar patterns throughout the colony. In one estate sale that took place in St. Charles Parish in 1790, Andre McInerney bought two quadroon children, Joseph, age 8, and Felicite, age 3.5, recognizing her as his natural daughter and obligating himself to free them. Now, emancipation of slave children, often no doubt by their white fathers, was common enough to be a major reason why. And in 1807, the first legislature of the territory of Orleans, passed a law that banned the emancipation of slaves under the age of 30. And banned the emancipation of slaves under the age of 30. What, you 30? You're too young. It's a big deal right now. If the motivation had been simply to limit the growth of the free population of African descent, the age limit would have been higher. And the mere fragments of emancipation documents found for the Poincaré Post indicated a high emancipation rate compared to the Anglo-Northern American before the American Revolution, as well as with the British West Indies and Cuba during the 19th century. Now, although the emancipation of white men's concubines and mixed blood offspring was widely practiced and socially sanctioned, if not demanded in Poincaré, a substantial number of black and mixed blood women obtained their freedom through litigation and self-purpose. And there was 3 women, Marie-Jeanne, Teresa Naglise Libri, and Cicely India Libri, who struggled to obtain their own freedom and freedom for their relatives, as documented in some details. Now, although all 3 have evidently had sexual relations with white men, the relationships were apparently brief, and the male relatives of these women were deeply involved in the struggle against slavery and played leading roles in the 1795 conspiracy. Now, slaves worked, saved, and litigated to free themselves and their families, and the network among women was particularly strong. Women played the leading role in winning freedom for themselves and for their kin through litigation, purpose, and self-purpose. And the elder black men the elder black women, freed through sacrifices made by their daughters or through their own labor and savings, is touching. Now, nevertheless, sexual relations with white men was a major road out of slavery. For slave women and their children, the Creole slave proverb at the beginning of this chapter explains the priorities among men. And the black man stole first priority was wealth. Man. The white man used his money to steal girls, taste for dark women in order to obtain freedom for themselves. And bitter is their struggle. As hard and bitter as their struggle was, some of these women succeeded in transforming themselves in members of their families, from slaves to freed people. We're going to stop there, man. That was the end of chapter 8 right there. We going to come back next time with chapter 9 and pick back up with chapter 9 next time. The Re-Africanization under Spanish rule. That was the end of chapter 8, the Point Capit Post. Man. Yeah, that's it, baby. Chapter 9. We got 9, 10, and 11 left, and we're going to finish up the book. Well, the point was, or the objective. The objective was to get to finish reading to chapter 9 tonight, and even just to get back started in this book, man. Just to get back started in this book. And we have done that. We have succeeded. We have succeeded in something small that we are working to be able to succeed in something great. So let's keep pushing one book at a time, man, and see what we can find, man, and see what treasures awaits us, my people, man. So, hey, that has been Reading with Shiloh. Like, comment, subscribe, tell your people, man, we out here reading shit. I got like three sessions going, 3 different sessions going. I got Reading with Shiloh, Rising Scripts, and the Sabbath reading so far. So, and I'm almost done with multiple books. We're going to soon be done with this one. We're going to soon be done with the book of Jasher. So that way we can go ahead and move on to some other books that may have some more information in for us. But until then, man, we're going to keep pushing. This has been part 22 of Africans in Colonial Louisiana by Miss Gwendolyn Midlo Hall, man. If you want to look it up, read it, check it out. It's a lot of information here, man. A lot of information. I feel like I'm in history class, man. But I also feel like something is on my back right now. But now I can sleep. So, man, it is what it is, man. Shalom, everybody. I hope y'all have a wonderful day today. You know, keep rocking, keep pushing, man. Keep rocking like a cut-off stocking. Keep being official like a referee with a whistle. Come on, man. Do your thing. be good like Ziggy Wiggler. Yeah. Once again, shalom, everybody, man. I hope y'all have a wonderful night, man. Shalom, man. I'm out here, man. Shalom. I'm out here.